what we found is that a careful reading of the Greek of Acts 10 and Peter's conversation with God showed that this simple fisherman was also blinded by the prevailing Jewish traditions and bylaws that sought to avoid Gentiles at all costs. And it took the Spirit of God to open Peter's eyes to the truth that in Yeshua, Jesus, the Gentiles too can be cleansed by the power of Messiah's blood. So go back and read Acts chapter 10, verse 34, verse 35, and verse 43 to specifically see Peter's language where he talks about, oh, and I'm paraphrasing, oh, now I understand, God doesn't play favorites. Anyone who comes to trust in God through his Messiah, Yeshua, can be declared righteous by God, can be justified by God, can be filled with the Spirit of God, and the proof is, at least for Peter at that time, was that the Holy Spirit had fallen on Cornelius' house, Cornelius' friends, Cornelius' family members there, and the Jews were witness to that. And remember, the thing that made this all the more amazing to Peter and his Jewish companions was the nationalistic view that the Holy Spirit was reserved for Jews only, specifically religious Jews, but the Holy Spirit was the Spirit of holiness that was only poured out on existing covenant members, that is, Jewish covenant members. So how could these Gentiles receive the otherwise exclusive Spirit of God without having undergone the formal conversion to Judaism first? How is it that God was recognizing them as righteous, as genuine covenant members, only by placing their faith in Yeshua and bypassing the man-made ritual conversion? That's the eye-opener for Peter. That's when he realized that God doesn't play favorites, that it's not about, that covenant membership doesn't hinge on ethnicity, that covenant membership and justification do not depend on being declared legally Jewish from the perspective of the authorities of that day. That's when Peter really began to understand. That's when he put together the vision that the sheet that was lowered down wasn't a test of kashrut. It wasn't a test of whether or not Peter's going to eat unclean food or remain clean by only eating that which was permissible according to Torah. That's not it at all. The sheet contained all manner of foods which represented all manner of people groups. So that's what's going on. So you guys understand what I'm saying here? I think most of you are. Most of you have been following my commentary for any length of time. Believe that I don't think that Acts chapter 10 is teaching an abrogation to the kashrut laws, the dietary laws. That's not the vision meaning. In fact, if you don't take my word for it, take Peter's word for it, right? Peter himself says in those verses that I highlighted, 34, 35, and 43 of chapter 10, now I understand that God doesn't play favorites. Now I understand that it doesn't matter which people group you belong to. Peter doesn't say, oh, now I understand God's lifting the dietary laws. Wow, that was such a burden. You can hear the sarcasm in my voice. Wow, that was such a burden that no one could keep. Such a yoke that no one could bear. This trying to keep kosher all the time when it's so much easier to eat ham and shellfish and things like that. No, that's not it at all. That doesn't really accomplish anything in the eternal plans of God to lift the dietary laws. From a salvation perspective, what was most important from God's perspective is that Gentiles be brought into the people group just like Jews. And the way they get in is the same. Faith in Jesus, faith in Yeshua, and being filled by the Spirit. So I really believe that there's a better way to read the passage. And I think if you go back and read it that way, you're going to find that it fits more with the context of the rest of the New Testament. To be sure, it fits better with the context of the prophecies given about the Gentiles coming into Israel, joining themselves to Israel's God, accepting Messiah's yoke, and really becoming one people group as described in Ephesians.